Hi, thanks for joining us for our first in our Wish You Were Here series of author chats. These chats are giving us a chance to get to know a few authors who we'd love to have with us for our Coast of Magic, but aren't able to make it due to deadlines or other obligations. Tonight, we're getting the best of both worlds. Our first author, Rayvn Salvador, will be with us in Daytona, although our second author of the evening, Jennifer L Armentrout, is unable to be with us at the beach. So Florida author Rayvn Salvador spends most days plotting murder and conjuring ghosts. Her goal is to lead her readers on a sensory overload and evocative journey full of emotion. And if she can keep you guessing and make your heart race while she's at it, all the better. And then we have #1 New York Times bestseller and #1 international bestseller author Jennifer L Armentrout, and she lives in West Virginia. When she's not hard at working, she spends her time reading, watching really bad zombie movies, pretending to write, hanging out with her husband, her border jack Apollo, border collie Artemis, and 6 judgmental alpacas, 2 rude goats, and 5 fluffy sheep. Thank you both for making time to chat tonight. And I know you're getting ready for Visions of Flesh and Blood to release very soon.
We are.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay, so as part of the Wish You Were Here series, we like to promote live events and, fan interaction. Do you guys, either of you, have any like favorite in-person convention or live event story? Why is live event so important?
I think it's hard for me to pick one. I've had so many great experiences doing live events, in the United States and overseas. I think the overseas ones, they always kind of hold like a different place in your heart, because you kind of think that, if I wasn't writing, I would not be sitting in Italy or Germany or the Netherlands type, and meeting people is pretty amazing. And I do think live events are super important, because I think back when I was younger, when I first started reading that wasn't a thing really. Like, to be like, I imagine there were book signings at like bookstores, like in big cities, but like you couldn't really go see your favorite author. And I think that that's usually cool to be able to do that. So I really think it's fun to meet the readers and get to see their excitement.
Yeah.
I started out as a book blogger, so I had the same thing. When I started my blog, I couldn't find a signing to save my life. So that was really difficult. And then Coastal came about and I started being a featured blogger. And then I started working with people being an assistant. So I got to see that side of it and see how that all worked. And then of course I, peppered in there where I'd go as a reader, and you experience it differently that way. And then my first signing ever as an author was Book Bonanza. I don't know what I was thinking. My second signing ever was a Polycon. So I picked the 2 biggest ones I can possibly get to do. But for me, it was an interesting experience. I mean, I'm who the heck is this person? Who is Rayvn Salvador? I've never heard of her before. I'm not going to stop by her table. So I'm sitting there, making eye contact with people as they walk by. Oh, hey, I like your shirt, whatever. So the last day, when they'd hit everybody that they wanted to see, they would come by and I would lure them in and, give them my spiel and talk to some people. And I actually got, some friends now. We talk quite often on social media because I met them at these signings, which was fun. So yeah, it was interesting for me. I've seen it from all walks of life, I guess you could call it.
Yeah. As a reader perspective, it is so fun for us to meet the people that create these worlds that we get to, escape into. I mean, it really is such a fascinating experience for us as the reader to meet you guys and talk with you guys and have that back and forth into some of our favorite characters and people. And so you guys are our rock stars. So we definitely appreciate every attendance, every fan interaction, every word you guys are putting down on the page so that we can then be entertained. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. Okay, so jumping right into Visions of Flesh and Blood, which I have been waiting for since you guys started talking about this. It looks so pretty. The cover turned out great. I'm sure everything inside it is absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Let's go ahead and read the official blurb, so we know what we're talking about here. And it's a Blood and Ash Flesh and Fire compendium. And it is a comprehensive companion guide for background, history, reader favorite information, art, and reference materials. And then it's combined with original short stories and scenes from some of the world's most beloved characters, as well as never before seen visual enticements. It is a treat for the senses. I'm very excited about that. Told from the point of view of Miss Willa herself, the compendium acts like research material, but reads like a journal and cache of personal notes, allowing the reader to revisit the characters in history they so love, yet view things in different ways. So I would like to know a little bit about where all of this started, because before we get this, we get the first book, right? So let's start off with you, Jen, just in a way of getting a sense of where this all started. Do you remember what first sparked the idea that would eventually become the Blood and Ash universe?
Yes, it's going to make absolutely no sense to anyone. It still makes no sense to me. I originally started getting the idea for the Blood and Ash world during the 2016 Summer Olympics.
Oh.
Now, I don't know why. I can't explain it. There's some loose Greek influence there, that I could say, there it is, that's the connection. But when anybody always asks, like, oh, where do you get your inspiration? And it's always such a hard question to ask, right? Because I don't even know how I went from point A to point, vampires and werewolves with that. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But that's where I started having the idea. But it took me roughly about I want to say about 3 years of kind of mulling it over in my head, because I had not written high fantasy before. And that's a different ballpark. You're not relying on the contemporary world as your setting. You're having to build an entire world, set all the rules, things that you just don't think about, like how do they get into communication with one another? How do they travel? How long does it take to travel? So it's like all that kind of stuff, plus like the mythology that you create. And I was nervous. So it wasn't until 2019 that I started writing it. And that really can be thanks to J.R. Ward. We were talking once at her event, I believe, and about books of the heart that you just have to write it. Like, even if it doesn't go anywhere, even if you don't sell it, you have to get it out. And that kind of gave me the push to be like, okay, you know what, I'm going to try this. And it started with that. And again, I can't even explain how I got from there to there on that. But I've always been a huge fan of Greek myths. There's a lot of Greek myth inspiration in there also. I've always been a fan of Atlantis, before Disney ruined it with people thinking it is a city under the sea. This originally was, right? It's a city that fell into the sea, maybe, if it was real. But I always liked that myth, and so combining those together, basically.
Yeah. Well, you've taken us on quite the journey. So I appreciate the 2016 Olympics. Thank you very much.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Olympics.
Yeah, no idea.
Now, that brings us, Rayvn, to your involvement. And that goes back probably a little bit further than that. And that is how the two of you met and started your friendship that eventually became a working relationship as well. So what can you guys tell us about how you met and how you have now transitioned that into a working relationship?
Well, ironically, the first time I ever met Jen was at Coastal Magic in St. Augustine. That was the very first time I had ever met her. So, and then I've seen her at other signings, over the years. But it's no secret, I am Blue Box's editor. So I have been involved in these books since, they took them on from Jen, and Jen, started writing them. And so I've been, knee deep, neck deep, over my head deep in these books. So we try to meet at a Polycon, talk to, some things in person. And I obviously am a fan too, so I'm in the groups and things. And there was a lot of talk about people wanting something like this, like a series Bible. They kept asking if Jen had one, and she would tell them that, yeah, my publisher, they keep track of all that. And, I have my notes and blah, blah, blah. And I think you talked to Liz and Jillian, right? And you're like, should we do something like that? Should we do a book like that?
Well, yeah, a lot, because every so often I would just be procrastinating, basically writing, and I would create like little maps, right, of like the bloodline map or the God map, and I would share them in the reader group, and people, and I sometimes would even put incorrect information on it because I forgot. But like, people loved seeing that, and so that was always kind of in the back of the head. But also readers really have been asking for a book from Miss Willa. And I've always said that I don't think I could write an entire book of Miss Willa because it would just be nonstop sex. And wow, yay. There's nothing wrong with that. I would just burn myself out writing that. But I feel like it was a Polycon 2 years ago. And I really thought it was I thought it was your idea, Rayvn. Like I thought like
the Willa part?
Yeah, doing it as a Willa part.
It
yeah.
was, yeah.
Yeah, because we talked about doing a compendium because the Bible, because the Bible exists. I printed out the Flesh and Fire version of it once, and I was like, oh my God, this is like so many papers. Like
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And so the meat of it existed, but the issue was you can't just put that into a book and people read it, because it literally sometimes certain things will only make sense to Rayvn and I, or the copy editor or another editor. But also you want to tell it in an interesting way. And I do believe, Rayvn, it was like, how about if we approach it from like, Miss Willa telling it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was how it came about. And they're like, well, do you want to help write it? And I was like, what, really? Sure. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to one of my other questions, is that if the series Bible existed to begin with, and like you said, that was geared towards you as the writer, you as the editor, you guys and Blue Box as the publisher, how much of that, pretty much, how much of that did you pull out to then make the compendium? Or did you basically have to start from scratch because now you're looking at everything as something that is reader centric and reader focused? Did you have to start all over again?
Not entirely. I mean, like I said, we had it, and I had to look at it in a different way because it needed to be presented in a prosy way, not a, bullet pointy way, which I still struggled with even when I was doing the timelines for the characters, because it's like there's only so many ways you can transition from, and they did this and then they did that and then they went here and then when this happened. So it's like I had to keep redoing that, and I would throw things at Jen and be like, is this even right? I mean, do we want to talk about this? Is this, do we need it? Do I want to throw this away? Am I missing something that's important? So there was a lot of that. But weirdly, like the world building stuff, when I attack that from being in a character's head and then marked everything up that I needed Jen to fix and tell me that the real reason or the real things with, that was fun for me, because it was, that was like telling a story with notes that I've had for years. So it was, making it readable. So that was fun. That was actually, I enjoyed that immensely.
Yeah. So does that mean that you had a primary help in creating the original series Bible, or were you picking up from notes that were already made?
I started it and then I actually contracted it out to a person. So I was heavily involved with what she was doing too. So I got to see everything and I made a lot of edits before Jen got to see it, even though there's typos all over the place. As an editor, that makes me want to like crawl in a hole. But it's a Bible. So yeah, so I was involved with that from the beginning. The ironic thing is that now as the series keeps going and I was writing, I fell behind on doing the compendium, like the actual Bible files for Jen. So we're fixing that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So how was it for you, Jennifer, to, I mean, this is your world, this is your baby you have created, and it's such a big, big story. How did you feel about opening up this to another writer who was going to be to making a significant impact on your world? How did, I mean, how did you go about working through those thoughts?
For me, it wasn't even something that I had to think about, because, yes, I created the world, I write the books, but by the time those books end up in a reader's hand, there's a team of people that are who have worked to get that book ready for the reader. That doesn't change the fact that it's my creation, it's my book. But rarely ever do books end up in the reader's hand with just one person being at some level responsible for that.
Right.
So when we started seriously talking about doing the compendium, I needed, obviously, because when a lot of compendiums are released, the author, there's, if you've noticed, if you look through the history of compendiums, it's usually an author and then someone else who writes with them, because it can be very hard for me sometimes to try to summarize something, because I don't write in that way, right? So it's like I want to flesh it out. Like I want to make it more confusing in the compendium for people. But it's, immediately I was like, Rayvn, this is somebody who's been editing the books from the beginning, but also had, dealt with the actual Bible itself. And it just made sense that I would, pull her in on this. But it also, you have to have that trust there, because there is going to, I'm not going to be able to check every single thing that's put into these things. I see it usually when I'm looking for it, like, you know what I mean? That type of thing. So you have to have that trust that this has the correct information in it. And the good news is again, we had the Bible, we had the meat, right, already. I do think if we didn't have that, I don't think this book would be coming out yet.
Yeah, it would have taken way longer to do. Way longer.
I'm pretty sure Rayvn had been like, no, thank you, but thanks.
I mean, it was even a little bit, well, first of all, being, a fan of this world, the imposter syndrome, me sitting there going, can't believe she's trusting me to do this. What is my life right now? So I had to get over that real fast. But the publisher, we switched the release dates for very, very, very good reasons. But in doing so, 2 additional books came out before this book, and I had pretty much everything put together it just needed final tweaks. And so I had to go back and add information from those 2 books to the entire book. So that was probably the hardest part about this, was trying to figure out how to put that in there and not screw it up. So I think it's fine. I read it so many times.
You did lovely. I'm sure you did lovely.
No, she did perfectly. And I mean, and honestly, even if you take, visions out of it, right? Any editor who I think edits high fantasy, it's like you have to give them a round of applause, because that is a lot of shit to remember. Like it is a lot of stuff, like and it's stuff that you cannot trust, right?
Right.
It's, because, especially in something like this that has its own mythology, it's like mythology in the real world. You're hearing one version of it. That does not mean it's always true. So it's like, having an editor who has to also know that I know you said this in book 2, but there's a possibility that was not correct, because now you're meeting somebody who actually really does know or something. So so there's a lot of that you have to deal with.
Right.
And the two series intertwining, and they're coming together so much now. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know. The characters are like, that now they think they know, but they don't know. So I actually attacked that in an interesting way. Because it was from Miss Willa's point of view. Miss Willa only knows what Miss Willa knows. She's only seen what she's seen, or met who she's met, and heard these stories. So, I'm not spoiling anything that's still coming for the readers, because Miss Willa doesn't know it yet either. So.
Oh, good idea. I think we're going to touch on that on a future question, but that's an interesting way to approach that, because spoilers.
Right.
So, and how did you go about, I mean, this is a creative endeavor. How did you go about finding Willa's voice, and, keeping your Rayvn hat, but also finding Willa's voice, which is not a character of your creation? How did you balance that?
I don't know. I sat down literally on the plane after we had our meeting at ApollyCon and came up with some ideas for the title. And by the time I got home, I had written the first diary entry and sent it to them to see if the voice was right. It kind of just, I felt like I was channeling her, because which was interesting for me, because I'm not a historical romance writer. And that's just kind of how she's 2,000 years old. And this all-knowing whatever. So it's like, it just sort of happened to be, a little more historical sounding, but it just felt right. And they agreed. Otherwise they would have been like, no, that's not her, go back to the drawing board.
But no, it's funny because she nailed it. It's because when I write Miss Willa, I write it as a 1980s historical romance author. And I don't mean that in the bad way, because that is my jam. That is what I like to read. I know sometimes it's not, there's questionable content. I understand that. However, I like that to read sometimes, that over flowery, like where the things they come up with to call body parts, for example, is amazing within itself.
So much, yes.
And so and so that's how, when I write Miss Willa, that's how I do it. It's just, and I can't even tell you why I chose that. It just made sense in my mind. And I think for me, it's because when you're reading her diary entries in the books, it's like, that can't sound like the book you're actually reading. It has to sound like another person wrote that. But that's her style.
Well, when you said that, something sparked. I have been in a ton of book clubs, right? And there's inevitably some point in time where somebody brings up the topic of just random things that, body parts are called. So I find this to be a perfect opportunity for people who are viewing to put their funniest or, favorite terms in the comments, because, oh my God, I bet we would learn a ton.
Oh, it's going to be hysterical. I love it.
Yeah. So that's a homework assignment for anybody watching the video at the moment.
Little random aside is I still, after doing this for a decade plus, still find myself blushing when I read or edit certain words. So writing them is always a little weird for me, because I'm like, okay, take a step back. Do it again.
That'll be funny. So we want your embarrassing words as well in the comments.
Yes, that's a good one. Yes.
So you mentioned, Jennifer, about it spinning into a whole nother series because of reasons, which I won't spoil for anybody. But when did you know that, wait a minute, this is bigger than Poppy and Cass? This is bigger. I mean, is that something you knew from the beginning, or is that something that partway through you're like, oh no?
It really started for me in the back of my head when I was writing A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and then especially in The Crown of Gilded Bones. And that's because you're actually getting more into the lore. So it's like the first book for me, I'm not going to dump all the lore into that first book. I feel like that would just, people like, well, I don't even know what I'm reading now, like type of thing. And I knew that I was going to, I always knew that what people believed were the gods wasn't necessarily the original ones, or all of them were correct, and that there were secrets there. And so I knew that always in the back of my mind. That's why you never saw the face of like Niktos in a lot of his paintings and his statues. But once I got to about, I think it was like the end of A Kingdom and then The Crown of Gilded Bones, I knew that, okay, I'm gonna have to really explain this. And I thought, man, instead of me just giving like this kind of like dry info dump in a conversation, like what if I flesh this out for a book? Because like what Syrah and Nyktos or Ash go through, I felt like for readers to really appreciate like what they've been through, also why Nyktos acts the way he does when you see him in The Crown of Gilded Bones. It's like I feel like you connect more with that, right? Like you are more related to it when you actually have read their story and you just weren't told it. And that is where that idea started to come from at that point, where I was like, what if I actually show what happened here and why it is the way it is? And doing that also allowed me to kind of, show readers like certain things that, that you probably wouldn't have actually gotten an answer for in the main series, because there would have been no reason to really super address something. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
However, you now see, well, this is why it is the way it is.
Right.
And I like that because again, you have readers love like the almost like little Easter eggs that they come upon, and and Visions itself has these little Easter eggs that are kind of like the answer's in front of you.
It's usually, Willa making some random comment as she's writing a character profile. Oh, did you catch that? Okay, good. I personally, as a reader and as editing, that was a brilliant idea because it really has made it so much more robust and so much more, it's just smoother, it feels like, because you can, what happened in the past, so you're hoping XYZ will happen in the future. So yeah, I mean, and I think having the two series made writing a compendium like this more interesting and almost easier too, because I was able to do both sides of it, the way past and then the present.
Yeah. And when you guys were discussing this project in full, like the books, because I know you guys do, I don't know if the right word is planning sessions or just basically like status updates on this is what's going to be in this book and this is going to, like, you guys are sitting down as a publishing company, and you're talking about these books. How often do you blow everybody's mind? Like you say, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and everybody's sitting you like, what?
I feel like, for me, it's, because, totally different areas, it's usually me making a phone call sometimes. And I do know just the last one, Liz, was waiting apparently. And I feel Shell through Liz was waiting for that one phone call for me because I had not given anything for a while. It is fun though. Like it's fun. Like when I know that I'm about to do something, I want to spoil it for someone. And since I can't spoil it for the reader, unfortunately, it's sometimes it's Liz or Jillian in a text. Other times it's me emailing Shell or Rayvn. Sorry, I knew I was going to do that. But like Rayvn gets the so what I do sometimes is I will just text and I won't say anything. I'll just text a scene, like no explanation whatsoever. And then I just disappear. They'll be freaking out in the text message and then I'm gone. I have notifications turned off. And then Rayvn gets the, kind of really super like fast, like blah 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 for me, because it's usually like when I'm writing. And so but it's I enjoy that, because I do know, especially like, in the final Flesh and Fire book, there is a ton that is finally, is revealed, that you just get excited for, because that, oh, wait until you see this type of thing. But the same thing with Visions, there is, again, those Easter eggs, those little tiny nuggets of information that, when you read it twice, it's like, wait a minute, like, what did you just say?
What?
Yeah, so it's kind of, the dynamic there is interesting. So she's usually spoiling it for Liz, because Liz reads, at pieces as she's going along, but Liz won't tell me half the time. So she's like, no, I don't want to spoil it for you. So I generally wait until I get, the book to look at to edit. But every once in a while, Jen will have something really good, and she'll just send an email to me and Liz, or Liz and I, and me. Sorry, I'm editing myself. And it'll be like, oh my God, did I just read that? But then my editor hat is on. And especially when I was writing Visions, because I had to think about how and where I was going to use it potentially, I'll send an email back to Jen and have like brackets of all the questions I have to see if I understand what she just sent me. And it's crickets because she's working.
Yeah,
So
like, and because sometimes it's like, it's in the book, like, ends up being in the actual book, and it's hard for, and Rayvn knows this, it's hard for me to pull that information out and then put it into an email. But like, and again, like, I feel like Rayvn doesn't get like the really exciting spoils that I do. She gets the, is this true? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if I say this, am I writing myself into a plot hole? And then, but keep in mind, I'm not really like going into a lot of detail about what I'm even sending. And this is something that I'm sure she might even do, because, it depends on what your writing style is. If you're able to turn off the editorial side when you're writing, is we know the whole story in our head, the backstory, right? We forget sometimes when we're trying to communicate it to someone that I'm just sending you 5 sentences, and I think like you have to understand that. Like, I don't think that, but you know what I mean? But that's probably how it comes across, where it's like, oh, wait a minute, I need to explain this a little bit better, because it almost always includes something that is a kind of a reveal, but you're not getting all the stuff that came before that at that moment. So it does make me giggle a little bit when I do look back and I look at those emails sometimes, where I'm just kind of like, also surprised that Rayvn can figure out actually what I'm saying in this, because I will give sometimes no other detail other than, like, one of them recently, this is not really a spoiler, but it was about the blood forest. And it was like, I was like, and I remember it like took like multiple emails back, because, we're like, wait a minute, no, this. So it's like, where it's, and sometimes I do that because it's easier than me, because I'm on like, I've said this to readers, I'm super late on this last book, like just life stuff, and also it's just a massive book, that sometimes it is quicker for me to email versus me sitting and pulling up a PDF of a book, right, and searching for something like the word blood and then just hating my entire life, like at that point.
Searching for
bad
blood
about
in a book titled of blood math.
And for some reason, like, I can never get that, because I know Rayvn has said to me multiple times how to do certain searches, and I cannot do it. Like, I try it and it just goes nope. Like, I don't know if it's just like, it's user error 100%. It's me. But yeah, it's fun when we have that type of thing, but also too with knowing that there are going to be some things in Visions that are going to be, tinkered with or elaborated on after the fact, and trying to, again, figure out how much of this are we really going to share, and then can we share it without readers realizing it is a spoiler at that point.
Right.
There was actually, I won't tell you what it is, but there was something that I put in there and I was super excited to put it in there. And I think we talked about it at the ApolloCon meeting and they're like, you're like, no, we can't put that in there because I'm putting that in the next book. And I went, oh, crap.
Yes.
That brings me to my next question. You know, in the blurb of the book, it talks about background, history, and reference material. When you're compiling must-haves, stuff like this, how do you decide? Where do you even start? How do you decide what to put in and what not to put in? I mean, do you guys go back and forth? Is there a summit meeting or like what?
Well, I feel like they put you know, she can 100% go into way more on this. My part of it is usually if I look for something and can't find it, then we now know, okay, we need to put that in there. But all of that is really Rayvn and, you know, anyone who helps with that, because I could never be able to do that. I wouldn't I wouldn't know what not to put in there. So,
Right.
The revisions of this book were interesting because I, you know, word vomited on the page and it was like massive. I think that when I got it, it was huge. And so we're like, we can't do that. The thing is going to be like just ginormous. So I did so many revision passes of, is that really necessary? Can I condense it? So I did a lot of summarization. You know, I had written it more detailed and I was like, they don't need to know that. Okay, there we go. And then the problem I ran into, and people will notice that when they read it, Sierra's profile,
did your phone just think it?
Yeah, it was.
That's hilarious. Sorry.
I didn't say that. But Serafina, her profile, I tried to cut that thing down probably 4 times. And what it is right now is as small as I could get it. And it's massive. But I mean, she's the primal of life. She's very important. So I couldn't find I couldn't find anything there that I didn't feel wasn't important. So it's like, all right, it is what it is. It's just going.
That's kind of crazy to me. Because that's something that I don't even realize, because like when I had mentioned earlier about like, you know, input on the actual Bible itself is, you know, again, if I can't find something in the Bible, then we know to add that at that point. But I've never really looked at like the portion on Poppy versus Sierra, but now I want to.
It's
because it's crazy when you think about it, right? Because Poppy was the original character, and it's kind of, you know, that it's Sierra's that has like, you know, more information, and that's interesting to me. But I think that shows that it was probably a good idea to write that series, because
yes.
It was weird how it happened. I didn't expect it. And I don't know if it was just easier for me to condense, you know, Poppy and Cass versus, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it is what it ended up being. And the more I read it, the more I'm like, it's all important. I can't get rid of anything. So
I think too is that Sarah, I feel like too, because Sierra's story her story is not coming to an end, obviously, with the last book, but I feel like you do get more of her life than you know. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, because you do get a lot of Poppy's life, but I do feel like, and I don't mean this this is going to sound terrible towards the character Poppy, but I feel like Sarah is also a much more complicated character. And a lot of people, originally when I wrote this, I wanted people to be like, oh, Poppy and Sarah are so much alike, to the point that when you realize actually no, they're not. Like, and you know, I was purposely doing that, like where I was mirroring it, but then you see like how I say to readers, where Poppy is going to look for the best in people, or wants to, like, you know, she's going to want to look on the good side of things. Sierra can force herself to a point to do that, but that's not who she is innately. Right. And I do think in fleshing that out, you have to, and I come from a background of psychology. So for me, fleshing that out, there has to be reasons for that. Every action, every narrative has an agenda behind it, and or something that drives a person to think a certain way, behave a certain way. And so when you flesh it out, I do think you get a lot more background on her, but I do think she is, I feel like she is more complicated than Poppy. That doesn't mean Poppy's any less of a character. It's that Sierra is, she's not good. She's not bad. And as I've always told readers, she is the anti-hero of that series. And I know that we're used to that always being the male character, but it's really Sierra who is it.
Well, and we created a book club specifically because of your books here, and it's called the Literary Pop-Tart. So shout out to those folks. But it's named for Poppy. Now, as the series has expanded and it went back in time, we have had the conversation about, Poppy might be the original character that you created and introduced to us, but Sierra is the original. She's the one who came first, even if we didn't know it. So I find your explanation of their similarities and differences so interesting, especially knowing a lot of the history that's going on. But pretty much Sierra is the reason for everything else that happens in the series, even all those centuries later. Exactly. So I'm not surprised whatsoever that her bio is the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, I tried. They just all needed to be there. I couldn't get rid of anything else.
Gold star. And also as a reminder to readers that the reading order for this series can be found on Jennifer's website. So she's got some pretty cool graphics on her social media and her website that show you what order to read it so that you get the best out of the reading experience. Yes. So, okay, so we talked about how to compile some of the must-haves and how you decided, what's going to be included and what isn't. Is there anything in there, and it could just be, something small, or it could be something large, that you felt maybe in the series has not gotten a lot of attention, something that you don't hear fans talk about, or you've never been asked a question about? Is there anything in there that's included that you're like, here, this is important, you should be knowing this information? If you don't know it already, it's going to be important later.
Oh no, I feel like our readers, I think all readers of high fantasy are very inquisitive people. And I mean that as 100% not me being funny. They want to know everything. They want to know things that I don't even think is a big deal. Like, I can't tell you how many times I just put something on the page. It's not important at all. It's not going to come back. Ian is dead, for example.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's this, nope, this is what I'm telling you it is. And I am always blown away, right, by what readers will latch onto. And, so I feel like they have a lot of questions. And that's honestly, that blows me away, because it's so cool that people care enough, that they get invested enough to even ask those questions, to want to know more that's not necessarily in the book. So I feel like for the most part, we tried to cover everything that we could. Right. Rayvn, you would also know, but I feel like we did probably everything we could.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, at the very end, I think one of our last discussions before we finalized it was, or before I actually went to editing, was some of the timeline stuff. I'm like, is this necessary? And you're like, well, if we do it for one series, we got to do it for the other one, and they're formatted differently. Like I introduced them differently, they're written differently, but she was 100% correct. It absolutely had to be there. If it was there for one, it has to be there for the other. Right. As far as stuff that they want, that I think pretty much everything is in there.
Yeah. I do want to say, though, I do remember one or two of these characters, and I'm just going to say it, and because I think I found it funny. I don't think Rayvn found it funny, or anybody else who last minute, when we would forget very important characters.
Oh no.
But not just the writing, but the artwork. Where we just and none of us could figure out like how did we forget this person, and we just did, it just slipped everyone's mind at some point. And I bet all of us at some point probably had a note somewhere that says, oh, I need to ask about this character. And then, work
Life happens.
yeah, it gets away from you. But I do think and again, like I know because Jillian, who's also at the publisher, she was handling a lot of the artwork. And so I would laugh because I'm not the one who's having to last minute find an artist who can do something. But yeah, so I feel like, I do feel like we got everything because we knew when we forgot something.
Yeah.
The good thing about it is I don't think we had any characters that we missed. I think our list of characters for profiles was complete. It's just for some reason none of us were like, well, we need that person. We need art for that person.
Yeah.
It was like, wait, he's super important or she's super important. Why don't we have art for them?
Yeah. So as stated as a compendium, you've got bios, you've got glossary of terms and pronunciation guides, I'm assuming, and maps, and I'm hearing artwork. So you've got like character sketches, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Nice.
There's well over 50 pieces of art in this, actually well over 50, but I'm saying 50 to start out, but there's a lot of art.
If Rayvn can open up, do you have the hardcover?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, so as soon as you even open it up, you see the blood forest on one side.
Wow.
And then at the back, it's the trees of Eos.
Very pretty.
Yeah, so that's just to show you, like, as soon as you do it. I know that we did spend quite a bit of time trying to decide what we were going to do there. It was either going to be that or the what did we end up calling that? The hallway, the Hall of Gods or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. All the pictures of the
I think we were calling it the portrait wall or something.
Yeah, something. Yeah, there was a name for it.
Yeah.
And we were trying to decide whether to do that or to do that, but we ultimately decided because the artwork of the blood forests and the trees of Eos are always so colorful. It's so pretty. But yeah, there's that. I mean, there's the portrait of the gods. There's the maps, and I do think, though, is this not the first time that map will have some changes on it?
It is.
Yeah, pay attention to that map. So there's that. I feel like that is something, because even in the books themselves, we will make little minor tweaks to the map sometime. And kind of like with the Game of Thrones season openings, right? How they would sometimes, show something new or take something away. And it's always kind of funny for me, like when the readers were like, oh, wait, they're like, damn it, it was right there on the map. And I do put some, there are still some very big spoilers on that map that always makes me laugh, because I only think a few people have caught certain things on the maps that have been in those books.
Yeah.
But this map on it, and I think it actually will be the full map of, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it's Solus, I don't have it in front of me, if we did one where it was like Solus, Atlantia, and then Elysium, or did we split?
They're split. They're still split because we couldn't.
Yeah, it's big.
Do it on the page.
You would have to do one of those things where you open up and then
right. Exactly, the fold out.
But you will look at those, just look at those maps closely. Like there is something there.
And be a little puzzle person and play with them for a while. Print them from the website and see what you can do with them. That's all I'm saying.
Nice hint there, basically. Another homework assignment for people. I don't think people will mind.
No.
I know that maps are always top notch. It's like, oh, what can we find here? So I know that that's going to go over very well. And the other art pieces, I can't wait to see, because I know that you guys have mentioned it before about other stuff, art pieces that have been commissioned for this, and I cannot wait to see how it all comes together, because
they're stunning. They're honestly, and I don't mean this lightly, this book would not be what it is if it wasn't for that. Those artists made visions. It's incredible.
And it's, basically like doing artwork is like doing a first draft of a book, right? Where it's like you're having to send it back. But I do feel it's so much harder when it's actually artwork, because when you're dealing with words, you have words to edit. And words are words, they have meanings, right? It is so hard to communicate what someone looks like to you, to another person, because I can say the same description to both of you, and both of you will likely have a different picture in your mind. And so those artists, like, they're so patient, like, because sometimes some of them would get it, in a couple back and forths, and sometimes it will take just a little bit more, and the patience on them is amazing, because I'm sure it's got to be frustrating, because you're just like, because you're like, what are you trying to say? I thought I got this. And so it's really hard, I imagine, to take somebody that someone else created and then try to represent that person.
Right.
Funny story about Vision's artwork. The Craven, trying to explain to somebody what a Craven actually looked like was hilarious, because we got like three versions, and it was like, what is this? No.
Yeah.
And how do we explain what it really looks like? So we're like, oh okay.
And the thing is, like, each version, even though like nowhere remotely what a Craven looks like, we're still amazing pieces of art.
They really were. They were incredible.
And then I'm like, I need to create something that looks like this.
Right.
Yeah. But I do think like the Craven is pretty creepy. Like, that is a
creepy. I love it.
Thing, yeah, that you end up seeing.
It turned out good.
Yeah. Well, you already touched on some of my other questions in previous answers, and that's about the fan meetups and how that kind of inspires you and social media feed. But is there anything else about the fan interaction that has inspired or made you just really happy about and excited about, this book coming out?
I mean, I think for me, that's made me excited is, again, it's it's almost, in a way, I feel like it's interactive. It's a little bit more interactive, because so many, there's like, I feel like two types of readers who, really kind of don't go searching for information that necessarily isn't there. And then you have the ones who want to know every little bit of drop of information. And I find, to me, that's so fun, because again, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that. And I'll be honest, and Rayvn knows this, I don't think about that a lot, because it kind of like, because I feel like, and not in a bad way, but it can kind of get in your head a little bit, because you're like, because when you're writing, at least for me, I don't think about that. Like, I don't, I feel like for me, I can't think about like people wanting to know information, how many people could be reading it, that type of thing. But I love that people want that information, and I'm excited for that. I'm also excited, I think, because again, this is a high fantasy. I, as the creator of this world, will forget things, because your brain can only hold so much information. So I can only imagine that for readers, it's even more so. And so I also like the idea that they're going to be able to have what I have when I'm writing the books, a reference to go back to when I'm not quite sure, like, did I actually say it this way or did I say it that way? Because that sometimes matters. And so I do like that. I'm excited about that.
We actually got our first review from one of the ARC readers earlier, and I happened to be out there and I read it, and it was exactly what I was hoping people would think about this book. They're like, all of us that do rereads, I'm not saying we still love to do the rereads because they're fun, but if you need a quick refresher, everything you need is right there. And I was like, good. That's exactly what I wanted to, that's what we were hoping for with this book, that it would be a fine,
because a lot of readers, like, whenever I have a new book coming out in this series, right, the post will start like, does anybody have a synopsis of the last 20 books? But like, the last whatever. And I always would joke around, like, I wish we could do, like, how, like, remember back in the day with TV shows where when a new season would premiere, it would have like a 2 to 3 minute clip at the beginning that showed you everything that happened the previous season.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that would be so cool to have that. It's like, so then I also don't have to work it into the book, reminding you of having, because that's something I don't think, again, Rayvn knows this. One of the hardest things when you are in a series, a multi-book series, you have to remind the readers of what has happened, but you have to do it in an organic, that you don't realize that I built this entire damn scene around me reminding you of certain things. And that, I would love just to be able to have a last season on section.
Right.
I didn't have to do that. But it's I think, yeah, that's God, that I'm glad to hear too, that that's giving them that, where it's like, okay, I can now go into the new book more excited or better prepared type of thing.
I think when we were talking about it, one of the things that I felt very strongly about in formatting it and figuring out what needed to go where was the character profile timeline. So I wanted to have a timeline for each individual character of only what they did and what they saw. So if you want to know, what Hector was doing at XYZ, you can read just his and know, he didn't know what so-and-so was doing because he wasn't there. So, I mean, and it was interesting for me compiling that information because things look so different to me when I saw it from such a narrow perspective. And I thought that was fun because I think that'll be interesting for the reader to see just that snapshot of one person from one person's point of view and nothing else was going on. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And I think that also, because we talk about this again with, reading between the lines, but also making sure that you read what's on the page. And I think that it's hard, even for me when I read books, to do that, to read between the lines, but also not forget what was actually said on that page. And I think then when you look at it like that tunnel vision breakdown of a character, Hector is a perfect example, because everyone was out there like, I don't trust him. And he is just over here living his best life and not doing anything. And I always knew, how that panned out. And the whole time I'm like, y'all gonna regret this one day. You and your suspicions, because this man has not done a thing. Right. Really to warrant this. But I think like once you actually see that, right, like you're actually seeing it just cut and dry, not in the terms of boring to read, but nope, here it is, this is what was there. I think that also can maybe cause you to go back and be like, wait a minute, I was thinking something else. Now I need to go back and like read this chapter or read this couple pages, whatever of the book, because now you're looking at it from a totally different perspective.
Well, that brings us into, us as a reader, we're reading the bigger story. We're getting all of this information. And sometimes we have to, do we really believe the information we're getting right now? Are the characters an unreliable narrator? But then wait a minute, we have this information, but then we have this information, and we forget that person doesn't have.
They don't know.
Yeah.
Information
and
yet.
also, I'm the problem here. I have 100% caused the readers to doubt everything I say because I'm going to give a twist. Like I'm going to, and readers who have read my other series, they know roughly when you get to about the third book in the series, I'm going to undo most of what you already know. And, and not in a way that doesn't make sense, but, and there's definitely foreshadowing. It's like, what is it? Is it Sixth Sense movie, right? Like when it's revealed, you go back and you're like, oh, it was there in front of me this whole time. Okay. But when you're writing, you can't make it obvious, right? So, but I do think that would you actually see all that? And that's the part that I think is really helpful when you have these types of things. And
that was interesting.
I know I make it hard for readers to trust what they're reading because they also know that I'm not revealing everything right then. So sorry.
Yeah, having read ahead of some people, so I knew some things that Jen holds a lot of things close to the vest. And it's more that, she'd tell me if I asked her, but I don't ask her for reasons. But so that was actually kind of interesting writing this too, because I know from discussions we've had in meetings some of the things that are going to shake out as things play out. So when I got to those bits that have already been revealed, I had to really think about it and how to present that, and then yet give you, like there's more to come without saying that, so that was interesting too. I don't know if you have a question about this, but we were talking about what readers want. And so we get so much about Willa's diary, and Jenna said earlier, I'm not going to write, 250 pages of sex. So we decided how many we were going to do. And then we sat down, and that was one of the funnest portions of our meeting, was trying to figure out who these people, these journal entries were going to be about, and how it's going to tie into the whole, big. So that was fascinating. And I think a couple of them are going to blow your mind.
Yeah, because she wasn't, we're not showing you just random hookups.
These are important moments.
Yeah, like one question I believe that people have had maybe since the first book is answered about that. And it's in there, it's answered. So I feel like that, that's also like one of those conversations that you really need to have where like people cannot overhear you, because they're going to be like, what are they talking about?
Exactly.
That was overheard at lunch today, and context.
But also a lot of times, something that Rayvn had mentioned about, like, sometimes she will know ahead of time as she's editing that I'm making this reveal. Most of the time I don't like it, and we do this on purpose, and because, like, if I'm revealing something that's pretty big or has like a big twist, right, I prefer it for her not to know, because it has to make sense to the person who did not know it.
Yep.
So if I tell you ahead of time, you're gonna start page 1 expecting this, so you won't catch, like, wait a minute, this isn't clear. And so I feel like it's always good to have that. And then there's been times where we can't do it that way, where I have to be like, I need you, I'll send a manuscript over to, like, the editors, to, like, Liz and her. And the first time I send it, and sometimes I'll have like these bullets of things to fact check that I'm not 100% sure on, or like, hey, try to pay attention to this. And, I might be ruining something a little bit, but, like, it's because I know there could be a problem there. Like, I may not have explained it correctly, or something may be off. And I feel like that helps in the editorial process, which I do think then helps when you're collecting all that information. Because in a way, I feel like that almost not warns you, but, like, certain areas are going to be maybe a little bit more difficult to condense down into a different version, because even me as the writer was like, we need to pay attention to this part. Make sure I got this right.
Well, that mixed with how you were talking earlier a few minutes ago about, readers know at this point that, most of what you say in the beginning is going to change at some point along the way for, obvious reasons that I won't spoil. So I want to start bringing our chat to a close by something that a friend of mine in our book club said, and I don't think she'll mind me sharing this. She basically said that reading your books has taught her how to read other fantasy books, because she is so much more aware of, like, wait a minute, I need to question this. Because reading your books has taught her to look beyond, the immediate.
Yeah.
So I find that a very interesting.
That is such a cool compliment. That is a cool compliment, because
I guarantee you she'll be watching this, so she's going to be excited.
That makes me feel better. Because, Rayvn mentioned something earlier about, like, I have imposter syndrome. imposter syndrome does not go away. I have it. It does not matter how many books you write. It does not matter, how many copies you sell. I feel like most authors still have that. So sometimes when we hear certain things, it's like, it can surprise us. And I know sometimes readers are kind of surprised that it would, because, we all, have self-doubt or like, oh, but, is this interesting enough, or can you understand it type thing. So that is cool when you do hear that, because I would have never thought that about my own writing.
Yeah.
I would have been like, go read Sarah Mass's books, like, to learn. But like, yeah, I do. I find that very, very, very nice. So thank you.
Very nice. And actually, I can take that and use it in a different way. I had somebody ask me once why I decided to start writing. And at the time, my answer was, I wrote my first book to become a better editor, because it helps me look at things completely differently. So, and then I just decided that I really liked it, so I kept doing it. So.
Edits actually, on the flip side of that too, is edits help you become, like, reading your edits help you or me become a better author, because we, sometimes it can take a couple books for us to pick up on certain things we keep doing that we then learn. And a lot of it sometimes is more, what's it called? It would be considered, I can't think of the words, like, there's story or developmental edits, and then there's like, what is it, structural edits or something? There's another word for that.
Line edits.
Line edits, yeah, where it's like you start to learn certain things that you're like, oh, I keep doing this. Like, and it helps you to a developmental edits, where it helps you learn how to pace better, to move stuff around, like, but I don't think I can. I mean, I don't think that I can't edit to save my effing life. So
I've told people, I think it actually takes a different kind of brain. Like, you either can do it and love it, or you can't do it, or, people hate it, so it's an interesting thing. Like, I love it. It's a passion for me. I want to do it until I can't, or it's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, on both sides of those, editing, writing, editing, it helps you grow.
Well, you're right. I think it does take a different brain, right? Because if you're the type of person who can't turn off the story that you're reading, you can't be an editor.
No.
And I'm that. Because my brain will autocorrect typos unless it's like an insane typo. Like, it will autocorrect and it will fill things in. And we all do that without realizing. As we're reading, we're filling things in, but an editor cannot do that.
Right.
And that is a rare talent to have, because you can't get lost in the story.
No.
Right.
Jen sent me an email the other day. I'm editing the upcoming book, and she asked me what I thought. And my answer was, I can't tell you yet, because I've only read it the first time, and I can't tell you what I think of this, that, and the other until I read it a second time. Because when I go in the first time, it's literally word for word. Like, I pick things up, but the pacing and stuff means nothing in my head, because it's like word for word. And then the second time, it's nice and flows nicely. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I can see. Let's continuity check that. Let's fact check that. That was like reading this the second after I wrote it. And, we went back and forth and we checked some things. When you're in there, it's choppy. And then you have to read it, from beginning to end. And I will say one thing, we got the proofs of the audio and I listened to it. It's a whole different world. I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. It actually like reads like a book, because in my head, it's like facts, bullet points. Because that's what I was looking at when we were putting it together. So yeah, good time.
Well, we know it's coming out on the 20th. So February 20th, which I believe is 2 weeks away?
Yeah.
Ish. So, or 1 week away. It's 1 week away.
No, please not.
I think today was 10 days if you don't count the day of today and the 20th. But
got it. Okay, so we know you guys are fans of special editions, that sort of thing. everybody can get this at their retailer of choice, and they get the standard version. Are there any special editions? Is there any deals going on with different publishers or vendors that readers should look out for?
Barnes and Noble has their own special edition, which mirrors, and they are always my like favorite covers because they're whimsical. I love those editions. They're just whimsical covers. And then Indigo, which I also love too because I love Indigo. Do they have a special edition on this one? I'm blanking.
Yeah, it's the barren tree, like the actual tree.
Yeah.
And
But also,
that's my favorite.
yeah,
But
well,
it
also
reminds
it's
me.
hard because and as sure people are going to be excited to know, we've seen, have you seen the Born of Blood and Ash covers?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I just saw the Barnes and Noble and the Indigo one. And so my mind's there, but also the Indigo one, I was like, wish I thought of that.
Right.
Yes. And it was a very minor change that changed the entire cover. People will understand when they see it, but it was like, I was like, I wish I thought of that. But it's yes, I don't know about any of the vendors yet. I don't know if they will, because I feel like that would be very difficult for them, because usually when vendors do it, like book box subscriptions, they put artwork in it. And so we kind of be like, but I don't even know if I can mention something, but there is something becoming.
I know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Is this a watch this space scenario?
Yeah. There's something else that's coming regarding this a little bit down the road, that I do believe that, I've been on deadline, so I know a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes that I don't know yet because no one wants to kind of bother me with it. But there is something else coming regarding this a little bit down the road.
Nice. Very cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap it up real quick. Is there any place on social media that you are more active than others where people can reach you if they've got a question?
I'm most active on Instagram, I think.
Instagram? Okay.
And for me, it's the reader group on Facebook.
And that's the JL Landers, right?
Yes. JL Landers.
Yeah.
Let's just leave of America, basically.
Yes.
There you go. Well, ladies, thank you very much for joining.
Real quick, before we get off here, I want all the people who see this to tell me something I just realized looking at Rayvn. Does she not look like Parker Posey?
Oh, yeah. You do look like Parker
Pull up a picture of Parker Posey, especially from Blade Trinity. I'm like, that's the whole time I'm sitting here like,
that's so funny.
Like, she looked like, and Dazed and Confused Parker when she was like, so look it up. That's it. Completely not related.
Oh my God, that's adorable. Well, I'd like to thank our two authors again for making time to chat tonight. If you've registered to attend Coastal Magic Convention in Daytona or will be popping in for the book signing, you'll get to meet Rayvn in person to sign your copy of Visions of Flesh and Blood. I hope everyone watching has enjoyed the chat, for spending time in your evening with us, and happy reading.
Happy reading always, as Miss Willa would say.